This is Verdict Watch in the Ashley MacArthur case out of Florida, where a former CSI crime scene investigator is accused of shooting and killing a former police officer in the back of the head. The state says it was premeditated, that money was the motive, and that the defendant buried the victim's body on property owned by the defendant's own aunt, covered the body with potting soil and concrete, and hoped no one would find it. That is the state's case. The defense said flatly, no, she didn't do it, and said the state didn't prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt. So we're back on this whole topic of back pain, this, that, and the other thing. Byron Brown still with me here from Phoenix, Arizona. Again, the way I look at this is that if your back is that injured that you can't engage in so-called recreational activities, then why are you horseback riding and doing all these other things? Anybody who's ridden a horse knows that it jars your back around a lot.
Yeah, the activities that the prosecution was able to show she was able to do, I think, overcame anything the defense was trying to do to show that this back issue and or the injuries are related to this car accident that happened multiple years ago would, at some point, I guess, preclude her from being able to murder right and then bury right in the fashion that that she was buried. So I don't, again, I think the prosecution just doesn't have the defense doesn't have a lot, and they're doing the best with what they have.
Paula Notari, I want to throw that picture back up on the screen if we can. This image of the defendant with this big, huge gun out on this hunting trip. There were a lot of pictures of her hunting. This is the one that the defense threw a fit about, objected to it, and said, okay, even if it is relevant, it is more prejudicial to the defendant than it is probative, because the picture could be perceived by some people as making her look like some kind of a cold-blooded killer. I personally don't think that about it. I just look at it as somebody who's out hunting. I don't read prejudice into that, but I guess someone could. What do you make of that picture?
I am horrified by that picture. I think it's extremely prejudicial. I mean, I guess some of it is gender bias, also the fact that I'm an East New Yorker, and you know, it's hard for me to envision ever holding a gun like that and hunting. I mean, but it is, as you said before, it's a hunting community, but still, I mean, when you're in trial and you're trying to defend somebody, you're trying to depict them in a certain way, and I think probably the focus on her injury was, again, to invoke some sympathy for her, although I don't think the defense was very effective. We can talk about that. But that picture shows a very strong person. It shows a person who's capable of committing execution-style murder, which is exactly what's alleged here. So I agree with the defense.
Silva, I want to ask you about this. I got into a Twitter argument with some of our other hosts about that picture, and a couple of our other hosts said it's not even relevant to this case. I argue that it was relevant because, again, the test for relevancy is just whether or not the fact that's proffered nudges the case a little bit one way or the other. I say that picture is relevant to whether or not this defense of the back injury rendering the defendant incapable of committing the crime makes any sense. I think that picture smashes the defense argument to smithereens. That's why I think it's relevant. What do you think?
Well, I think there's a distinction. I think it is relevant, but I do think it's highly prejudicial.
Yeah, that's the second part of the analysis, where you get there after you get to relevance, of course.
Absolutely. I mean, look, it's relevant. A jury would want to see that, because even though it's a hunting community, and I agree with what Paula said as well, you know, I'm in Los Angeles. We don't necessarily hunt here, and I understand that's a hunting community, but you're drawing lines. It's different when you see a client next to you, a defendant, to a jury. She's there, she looks meek, her hair is in a ponytail, but to draw a line to seeing her holding a gun and aiming it, whether it be an animal or a human, you're giving the jury an image that sears in their mind. It's highly relevant to show she could hold a massive weapon without issue. You know, you can see it's extremely relevant. However, in the law, we say the prejudicial effect overwhelms the relevancy of the picture. The prosecution was able to get their point across without even sneaking that picture in. Not to say the prosecution snuck it in, but they got the effect. You can show her doing the activities. You can show her having a gun behind her back to show that same relevant argument. but it's a whole new level when you're showing a defendant holding and aiming a gun with a squinting eye. That imagery sears in a juror's mind. And in a case like this, where there's so much circumstantial evidence, it's the death knell to a defense argument to see that.
I don't know. I mean, you know, I know that we've got people sitting in New York and LA looking at this, but John Phillips, let me ask you this one. If you're sitting there in the Florida Panhandle in a more rural area, certainly different from Miami or Fort Lauderdale or anything like that, you know, you're really close to the Gulf states here. Do people perceive that as overly prejudicial in that community? That jury came from that county.
I grew up there. I grew up on the I-10 corridor in West Florida and South Alabama. We now live in Jacksonville all the way to the east. But yeah, so it does meet the relevancy standard. You're 100% right about that, Aaron. And the issue is...
Let's just pause for a moment there, John Phillips. You just said that I was correct and my other two co-hosts were wrong. I just wanted to relish in that for a minute. Continue.
I'll go read their tweets and see if I can make it clear on the record for you. But it's the question of a smoking gun versus the smoking gun, right? And so nobody's saying it is the smoking gun, but it does kind of taste of more prejudicial than probative had this all been handled in motions in limine before trial with this picture. I suspect it would have been kept out. And the question is, what impact does it have on the jury? Is it a motion for a new trial? Probably, if they don't get the result. Is it the smoking gun piece of evidence? I don't think so.
Look, I'll admit to everybody, including to you, John, look, if I was the defense attorney, I would have objected to it as well. I just don't know if it's going to have the sort of explosive effect that the defense perhaps insinuated that it would have. Defense raising questions there that the state did not answer in the Ashley MacArthur case. Let's bring the panel in for some last discussion here. Silva, Megerditchian, does the state necessarily need to answer these questions in order to get a conviction beyond a reasonable doubt?
I feel like the state did. What frustrated me also about defense argument is the prosecution did a great job with chronology and telling a story with motive. I wish the defense told a story also. I feel like he was very into the reasonable doubt argument, which he has to address, and he went point by point to doubt. I just wish he told a story. Animate her, give her because she didn't testify. I think it's imperative that the jury understood who this woman was and why the motive was missing. You know, even simply saying, and I think the defense counsel touched on this, she might have taken from her, but that's not enough motive to kill her. Tell the story of the friendship. You know, the defense tried to bring up also that cocaine argument in the beer and the fact that, hey, you know, talking about it with your friends is different than actually implementing it. And I think that also kind of hurt them when the prosecution in rebuttal said the cocaine was in the beer. So again, he should have told a story. He should have humanized his client a little bit more and given a little bit more for the jury to hang their hat on when it came to reasonable doubt.
I agree with that perfectly. I mean, you've got someone here who at one point took an oath to uphold the law. Why not use that? Byron Brown, trial attorney in Phoenix. What do you think?
I just think there was too many loose ends and too many things for the defense to explain away. I agree that I don't think the defense did a good job of kind of holding the jury's hand and walking them through the evidence. I felt like it was kind of patchy. And again, that takes me back to there was just so much circumstantial evidence that the prosecution had and too many things for the defense to argue away that I think the jury's going to find that the prosecution did enough to convict her of murder.
John Phillips, you've been watching this case through most of the day. You were here with us for the closing arguments today. Some final thoughts from you.
We will have a verdict by 4 o'clock, and it will be guilty of first-degree murder. How about that?
You think so? Okay, you know, you got a hurricane bearing down there on Florida. The judge really wanted to kind of push this along, presumably because of the hurricane and also other scheduling issues. You know, this jury may be thinking about that as well, John.
You can't not. The jurors are humans, too. It's trial ad 101, and they know they went through a quick trial. It's, you know, I'm again from that area, and I have a feeling about this one, and but they are going to take it seriously because they understand this is a life or death not a death penalty, but essentially her life is changed. And this was a former member of law enforcement, one of the good guys who's turned bad. And so they're going to give it due diligence, but they also have to get, Dorian's not hitting up to Western Florida yet, but they got a weekend to plan.
Exactly. Look, it's a serious matter. I'll ask you the last question here. Paula Notary here with me in New York. If you were on the jury, how would you have to go on this one?
I think that John is right. I think this is just maybe a very quick verdict. I'm wondering even if the jury got. Is there a verdict?
Yes, I've got to stop you here. I'm hearing that there's a verdict in this case. We need to hit a break here at the top of the hour, but that's what I've been told, is that the jury does indeed have a verdict. So John Phillips,
oh wow,
you were off on the time, but you knew it was going to come today.
Wow.
We're going to be back live with that verdict as soon as we can. I'm going to be signing off though, and your next host will be here. Your next panel will be here. We're of course going to be in the background watching this. Certainly, I'm going to be with you back again here at 5 o'clock on the debrief to wrap this all up for you. Thanks a lot to this panel. Great discussions, and we'll be back with live coverage in a moment.